Welcome back to All the Miles Mattered. This is Neil Amato. Thanks for coming along for the run. I got the chance earlier this week to talk Florida running history with Frankie Ruiz, cross-country coach at Belen Jesuit in Miami. Belen is one of the top teams in the country, and unlike great teams of the 80s, it gets a chance to prove how good it is nationally because it will compete in national events after the state meet, the Nike Regionals and Nationals, which is mentioned when Ruiz refers to NXR and NXN. Ruiz says he's not a true scholar when it comes to the state's running history, but he certainly appreciates the past. As for his team's place in history, well, the next few days will go a long way to determining how Belen Jesuit is remembered. Here's the interview with Frankie Ruiz. Coach Ruiz, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for reaching out. I appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. So I want to ask about a quote of yours that I read. I think it was, a couple years back, but still fairly, I'd say current. And it was, I think what happens when naturally you win a lot, you can kind of lose that hunger. Why have your guys not lost that hunger to win?
I ask myself that constantly. I'm constantly worried about sort of losing that edge. Constantly looking for reasons to keep feeding them whatever keeps them hungry. Do it with the coaches, do it to myself constantly. Sometimes you even look for ghosts. And kind of, I'm not saying that people aren't coming after us, but I make it maybe even a little more elaborate, the description of how many or how big or how much of a threat what they've done so far is in jeopardy. So there's a little bit of that. And then I don't know, I have this inherent I guess part of me that I'm able to transfer to many folks around me, whether it's the kids or the coaches or parents or athletic directors or principals, doesn't matter who it is, about this need to want more. I don't know, I operated pretty early with this idea that you couldn't be content on Monday morning after a race. After a weekend race, I would send that email and I'm like, that's great, we won. Now what? So.
Right. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but this weekend you'll be going for the 7th consecutive team state championship. And I think, is it 14th as a school overall?
Yeah. It's funny. I have horrible memory. Thankfully, I have a coach named Juan Rodriguez who's been coaching with me longer than I've been coaching. Actually, he's been there even while I was a runner, who seems to be my memory, let's call him. He reminds me of things. If right now you'd be asking me this, I might be phoning a coach or phoning a friend to see to see what the number is. But it would be 7 in a row and 14 as a program, I believe, right? Let me just count that backwards. Yeah, it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. No, we have 14 already, so I guess this would be 15.
Okay, 15. See, it's easy to lose count.
I hope people that are listening are thinking of it that way. I just have horrible memory, man. It's my Achilles heel.
Okay, right. So I'm certain it's going for 7 in a row. I want to ask how the program now is different from the one that won a state title way back in 1995. I know your perspective is different.
Yeah, look, I was on that team. I was on that team, and I say on the team, not a contributing member of the actual state championship on race day. I was I'm not going to say I was left out. I left myself out, didn't make the top 7. And so I didn't get a chance to run at state. But I can tell you that the culture back then was very different. It was fun way before running. We just kind of use the running as this vehicle, if you will, to get to the forest to play manhunt, or take a longer than assigned run to go to somebody's house, or just the types of afternoons were different. And the sad reality is that probably equally, if not more talented runners were on that team, many of which come back, and many of which were my closest friends now, who I don't think they regret the fun, to be honest. And not like they're turning around saying, "Yeah, we should have won more." But they do every so often kind of wonder what would have been. But you fast forward to where we are now, and I do my best to remind them of the having fun, and doing whatever I can to insert some of that fun. But we are in just a different place when it comes to the way we handle workouts after school. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that your travel to upcoming meets is not all by school bus is a little bit different. And so I was hoping you could talk to me some about that upcoming schedule, specifically starting with the state meet this Friday, November 17th in Tallahassee. You're running there, and then 2 days later, you're running again in North Carolina, about 25 minutes from where I live.
Yeah. The thing, and going back to that for 1 second, on the way it was, was we drove everywhere. We were limited as to where we could stay. Funds were certainly harder to come by. Much more humble times. Not that these kids are not humble, but I'm saying in terms of means. The idea that Belen is far south, we had to go and race wherever the competition was, went only so far, because let's face it, like there was good competition nearby, and B, there was, again, we weren't as financially blessed. So throughout the years, both between the support of the alumni and the slight increase in funding, either because types of families that have started to come to the school, or because the school has allowed us some budget, we've traveled more. So we're used to going places. This squad is like kind of, I enjoy watching this program SEAL team, and I see them the same, which is like they get called for a mission and they jump on a plane, and wherever it lands, they go and they take care of business. Not that we're on a plane all the time, but I think you get the message. So when this issue came up where we were going to have 2 races within 48 hours, it was not that big of a deal. To be honest, at first we're like, gosh, it'd be nice if we had a week part, but the guys almost took it like, okay, what are the travel plans? All right, cool. It was that kind of mentality. What I will say is that as coaches, we do everything, or I'm going to do everything in my power to control as much as I can of the stress associated with travel. We're going to have our delays. We're going to have our mishaps at the car rental counter, all those things. And hopefully we're thinking ahead enough in case we do have any of these bumps that they're not major. Yesterday, I laid out the full schedule for basically a little bit over 48 hours. And on there was everything to the T of, hey, your training shoes are going to be within an arm's reach after you're done with that state meet, because I want that cool down done, within 15, 20 minutes. So you're not going to go back to the bus. You're not going to go see your girlfriend. You're not going to go, have a snack. You're going to just get that done, because I want them off their feet pretty quickly. So there's going to be things like that I intend to do, but I don't want to make it to be a bigger deal than it is. I think, we've done a couple workouts back to back to show that they can, from just mental and even physical standpoint.
Right.
And I told them, I said, listen, if anything, it's going to be a great story for you to tell. And it might be the same story you're going to be telling for years, because this doesn't look like it's going to go away. I think FHSAA has found what they find to be a cooler weekend. I don't know what that means, which is something they've always been saying they wanted. And then I think it has something to do with the football schedule, collegiate football schedule. And I am a little disappointed that's on a Friday. I think that hurts spectator attendance as far as the state meet's concerned. And I am somewhat same issue I have with the NXR being on a Sunday. I just think it, again, the sweeter day of the three is usually on Saturday. But nonetheless, I think Nike accommodated. FHSAA didn't necessarily accommodate. It was the other way around. They did their own thing, but Nike did accommodate because they could have easily put it on that Saturday. Then I think we'd be having a slightly different conversation because 24 hours is a bit much.
So, how do you get from Miami to Tallahassee and when?
So right now the itinerary has us flying Thursday to Tallahassee. A couple years back, we made a decision and this is regardless of NXR, we made a decision to do our best not to drive both ways. Just so we'll do one of the two legs. Typically, it's the first leg, meaning getting to so that their legs aren't all heavy and we haven't been sitting in the car for 8-9 hours. So that was going to be done no matter what. So we're flying. One thing is we're not going a full day early. Normally we'd go to state a day plus early, but this time around we'll be going Thursday. And the state meet is Friday morning, so we'll do that. I think the race at 10:15. Then right after the race, we'll go back to the hotel, grab our stuff. Hopefully they give us late checkout. Grab our stuff, have lunch, and start driving to Jacksonville. Jacksonville, we'll jump on a plane and go to Charlotte. Charlotte will connect to Raleigh, and then get to the hotel. I estimate about 1 a.m. So it's not ideal, but it's the best that we were able to find from a financial standpoint and from a time perspective that put the boots on the ground there by Friday night, basically. I mean, really is early Saturday morning, but Friday night, and they'll sleep in for a bit, and then we'll go do the course and try to get to bed early.
And that's a course you saw, I guess, about a month ago?
Yeah. So it was important for us to go to Great American to make sure that the guys had that course fresh on their minds. I think we had a pretty good handle on it based on their performance, but nonetheless, I think that's a course you can never take for granted, with the hills, with the cold, with the rain, lately it's been a little rocky. So the more that I can let them see it, the better, for sure.
Right. So on your Facebook page, the summary or intro words say, empowering the world to run. That's definitely beyond the scope of a high school cross country coach. I'm aware of some of your other duties, but why is that important to you?
Running something I found thanks to my dad when I was about 10 years old. I think a lot of folks have a very similar experience, whether it was a parent or a friend or someone that introduces them to this world of freedom, because that's the best way I know how to describe it, because it just gives you this incredible freedom to be as good as you want to be with it. And then it also gives you freedom in so many other things. The more you do it, from a health perspective, from a mental perspective, you name it. And so I realized that early on, it was a space or a sport that I wanted to spend time in. I didn't necessarily have it entirely plotted out, but I knew that I was going to be doing stuff with it, whether it was running in the Olympics as a child you imagine, or doing something that was related to the sport. And along the way, picked up the idea of putting on the Miami Marathon. Along the way, I realized there was a need to serve young adults and adults in the community. So I started a bunch of run clubs. Along the way, I even picked up a running store and thought that would be another area. Took up some more initiatives with kids and what we call the Kids Are in Miami program. And all the while, the one constant besides the running, and I competed in college at FIU for a little bit and some stuff for myself, all the while the one constant was that I wanted to always coach. So all these other pieces were things that I did that allowed me to coach, right? So whether it was starting a business in a certain way, or running a running store, or doing things related to the field of running, would allow me to coach and allow me to leave at 3:00 and go do what I enjoyed the most, which is coaching. And so I built sort of this ecosystem around running that allowed me to make a living, and a pretty decent one. I'm not gonna I'm not going to lie. I've had my company acquired twice. I still have another company that organizes and consults in races. I still operate all these running clubs, and I still get to go to practice every afternoon. It's getting harder and harder. I've got 2 toddlers
Hmm.
and a beautiful wife, so it's less time that I feel like I can freely give to coaching. But just when things were, say, getting complicated for me, I decided to complicate things even further, and I 2 years ago decided that I was going to take the cross country kids for a month at Flagstaff. So that's all brought its own challenges with a family and my wife's ambitions and her business and my kids' lives and stuff. So I'm hanging on by a thread, as they say, but for now I'm here coaching.
Right. Yeah. It's a good time to be coaching. My podcast really focuses on more history than current, but the reason I'm bringing this up and the reason I wanted to have you on is, one, are you familiar at all with the history of Largo high school cross country and Lato in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s?
So I can't say I'm a scholar at the history, but Coach Haley did give me his book. I had a chance to go through that. I've heard tons of anecdotes. Listened to 1 or 2 of your podcasts. I know that you've had him for a little while, so I was able to listen to that back about a year ago, I think, when you launched, and some other folks had tagged me on it. So I know a little bit, but if you were to start quizzing me, I'd probably struggle a little bit because my memory's so darn bad.
Yeah, I
Hate to
wasn't
keep
trying to
using that as an
quiz. I
excuse.
was just curious.
No, look, I one of the first calls, at the very least, one of the first messages I wanted to send when we did break that record was to Coach and Coach Haley. And for me, it just means so much to have these marks established and these challenging marks, because you asked early on, like, what keeps you in the game or what keeps kids hungry. And I said, let's face it, it's some of these marks, right? It's some of these goals and records. And I'm not saying we all need to do everything for that, but it just showed. I was a high jumper in high school, and I always want to know where the bar is. Like you were taught not to look at it, but you had to know where it was, because that determined your effort. That determined, what you were going to do to get to that. Whether it was, in my case back then, they did in feet, so 6'2" or 6'4" or 6'3", and I think Largo and so many others before us, we talk a lot about at Belen. We talk a lot about the traditions and the winnings of teams that came before them. They set the bar. They really did kind of establish things that allowed us to sort of aim and say, okay, well, we know that excellence at least lives near that. Let's shoot for that. So I can't I can't ever glaze over, no matter how far we take this or how far the next team takes their streaks or their things. We can never glaze over the bars that were set, by those that came before us, because their bar was not at 6 or 7 or whatever. Their bar was lower, and they put it there. So we just built on top of it, and I appreciate that.
So you said that Coach Haley sent you his book.
Yeah, and he filled it out, and he signed a bunch of things. Yeah, it's really neat because he hand wrote a bunch of things. I wish people did that more often. That was pretty cool. It's my book, one of the books on top of my favorite running books. And when I have my own little office at Belen, that's one of the books that I want the kids to see on top of a coffee table or whatnot. So
Right.
I don't have my own office yet.
So in addition to knowing a little bit about Largo and having the book from Coach Haley, who are some of the role models in coaching or just other people that you look up to?
So look, Coach Haley came from that time where I think coaches were in the raw. They didn't have access to all this info. They didn't have the plethora of books and clinics and online seminars and on-demand videos and access to news and access to results and whatnot. During that time, you had Coach Carlos Barquin, which I happened to be given the job by. at Belen, and you had the Barks. We call his Bark King's short nickname is Bark. So you had Bark, you had Haley, you had Coach Peach, you had Coach Boza from Tampa Jesuit. You've had these guys who coached at a time that you really had to appreciate the innovation, the experimenting, the grit that they instilled in their teams, and definitely with science, but maybe not the same, the readily access to that information. So those guys were definitely folks I looked up to. On a more personal level, maybe not so much on the running side, specifically to coaching cross country. My dad, who introduced me to the sport and has helped me along the way. Still, I look, he's gonna be driving up to Tallahassee to watch the race, and then from there he's gonna keep driving because he hates planes, so he's gonna keep driving to Gary. So him and my mom are still big parts of what I do, but I gotta put them both in there as mentors. And then I don't know, I've talked to quite a few coaches along the way that have opened the doors. They've opened their doors, they've answered phone calls, they've answered emails. Yeah, I've had quite a few. I'm not gonna lie, both in the sport and outside the sport. I owe a lot to a lot of folks that have helped us along the way.
So I know you get asked this a lot. I've seen it over the years in videos. Every time you have a really good meet and a really strong team, which is, of course, many, many years, you get asked.
I dare to say this might be one of the greatest teams in Florida history. Would you agree?
So I'm going to ask it again.
Well, I mean, the good thing is that their chapter hasn't ended, or their book, so to speak, hasn't been finished. And I'd hate to say that it is without that coming to an end, or their particular season being fully written. If I had to say right at this moment, I think this team has that label around the corner. Certainly one of the best teams I've ever coached. They do certain things that as a coach you kind of try and teach, which you can't. And I realize it's either something that they sort of teach themselves or they master themselves. You can suggest it, you can tell them what it takes, you can do all those things, but ultimately it's up to the team to really like embrace this idea that it's not wanting to be the best, that necessarily, everybody wants to be the best. I can tell, I want you to be the best, but it's what it means to be the best. And this team has done two things. They've got their floor really high. In other words, their off days are better than most best days, most teams' best days, most teams that I've coached best days. And their consistency is second to nothing I've ever seen. Like, whether it's in my school or teams that I've watched from afar. You've had teams that have great team averages, but how often do they come close to that team average? How often are they even moving that team average? Let's say times aside, how often does that team have a runner that's he's just a little too far back now, the compression is off? I mean, you see it time and time again in teams of the past, but this team just does not have that. I can't say it's an off day. I go back to it. Their off day is just a great, it's usually somebody else's great day. So that to me, if I had to measure what makes them so good in the history of Florida, times aside, state championships aside, all those things, although all those things are going to matter in terms of how they're described or remembered, the main thing is that these guys just are really good at being good, and they're consistent at being good. Like they do both pretty well. So,
and you're right, it hasn't been written, it's not complete. It's a little bit early for me to ask it, but this is the day we're talking. The other thing I'll ask, kind of to end with, it goes back to schedule. Obviously there's national aspirations, as there should be, but I guess thinking about this 2-day turnaround, are you kind of prohibited in how much you could go after this Friday race because you're racing Sunday?
In what sense? What do you mean prohibited? Sorry.
If the state championship was your last meet, you'd be putting a ton more effort into it than you would in this current schedule.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
But
And
maybe I look at it the wrong way. You can tell me I'm looking at it the wrong way and that you can go at it
no,
both days.
at all. And I think that's what I've been trying to do with these guys from the beginning, knowing that we had this setup towards the end, which is not overly emphasizing one particular race. Even if, I guess, my 20 some odd years of coaching have led me to understand the psychology of a kid a little better. And I used to tell them everything, put everything on state, like everything. I want you, this is it. I don't care what happens before or after or leading up to. At state, all bets are off. That's the race. And throughout the years, I've thought to myself, I'm like, no, I can't overemphasize one race versus the other. Yes, naturally they're going to know that something weighs more and it's just a bigger deal and you don't need to add more to it. And with that, I've also said to them, and this was something we talked about in August, I said, I'm going to let you guys decide how much shoulder you guys want to put into state. It's not going to be coach's decision. In other words, I'm not calling the play here, which is take it easy or go hard or none of that. I want you guys to determine what you want to do. And we sort of did this at regionals, and to a certain extent we did it at districts, where I said, listen, guys, that, let's face it, you know what you're facing right now. You can score 15, you can score 30, you can score 50 and still win. It's up to you guys. What do you want to do? And these guys, so far, they said, we want to have fun. We're going to go race together. We're going to keep ourselves together. No tempo, instructions, no, hey, I need you to do this, hit this exact time. I've given them a sense, and I said, listen, I think this course, you guys can break 16 if you put yourselves all together, whatever. But I've been very short with my instructions, and I kind of want to take state that way. If it was the end all and there was no NXR, NXN, yeah, I'll tell them about, hey, what about if we went for such and such record? You guys want to be remembered by that? Well, it's there for the taking. This is how much it would require. Go at, again, some of them still haven't, Marcelo and Josh have still talked about whether they're going to go and give Kuhn a run. And I'm going to leave it up to them, to be honest, because I don't want them to be looking at me and say, we did that, and now look how we're flat on Sunday. Because these guys do like to go fast, and they don't go fast that often at practice. So yeah, I don't know if I gave you the answer you wanted, but that's kind of where my head is right now with Friday.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know that I had certain one that I wanted. I was just curious if it's limited. And it sounds like you're kind of leaving it up to like that quarterback on the field looking over the defense to use a different thing. It's like you're letting them call the play.
Yeah, let them call the play and also respect the competition. Like, let's face it, like everyone knows there's the state championship. And for me to discount or downplay, just walk through your state championship is disrespectful to the sport, disrespectful to the competition itself. And I don't want to de-emphasize it, be like, oh, it's just another step along the way, because there's a couple teams that are pretty darn good and nothing's taken for granted. But I also have to be real with what they're facing the next couple of days. So I'll suggest certain things, but ultimately, you guys call the play. You know the ramifications of putting everything you have on Friday, how you're going to feel on Sunday.
Right. Frankie, this has been great. I really appreciate it.
No, Neil, I appreciate you holding on to the history. For those that don't know it as well, I think it's important that we continue to tell it. In Florida, look, I think of the Miami Marathon as one of those races that it's been around for about 20 years or so, but it's rooted in the Orange Bowl Marathon. It's rooted in the Metro-Dade Marathon. It's rooted in some races that actually affected what New York's and Boston's and Chicago's and some of the great races have become, because they planted those first flags and they planted those first few seeds. So the fact that you're doing the same for cross country, for what Largo is, not was, but is, that matters. That matters, and I'm glad that the name of your podcast, Matt, includes the word matter. But thank you so much for doing what you do, and thanks for the invite.
Well, thanks. Perhaps I can get to see you run in person on Sunday. I'm not sure I'm getting there, but it's a short drive for me, unlike your parents' drive. So
you're in what town, you said?
I live in Apex, which is Apex borders Cary.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I know where Apex is.
My daughter ran her last high school meet at that course. So yeah.
It's a cool course. It really is. You guys are lucky to have that there. It reminds me a lot of Tallahassee. Tallahassee is the Appalachia course is very, very similar. It's I don't know. I think Florida has this, and that's one of the reasons that I'm excited that this particular team has put Miami or Florida on the map. I think Florida flies under the radar in a lot of its history, its running history, and its place in the sport. I think it's important that we don't forget some of the foundations that were laid down here.
Again, that was Frankie Ruiz, the coach of Belen Jesuit. Largo in boys cross country still holds the Florida record for public school state championships with 10. Belen, a private school, overtook Largo, winning its 11th state championship in 2019. The boys team that finished second that day to Belen was Robinson High in Tampa. Who's the coach at Robinson and what's his tie to this story? Find out on the next episode of All the Miles Mattered.